Welcome to this special Vote 2012 edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Tonight's show is a debate. We'll hear from candidates running to represent Arizona's 9th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. As with all of Arizona Horizon's debates, this is not a formal exercise. It's an open exchange of ideas, an opportunity for give and take between candidates for one of the state's most important offices. As such, interjections and at times even interruptions are allowed, provided that those that are interrupted get a chance to respond, and we'll do our best to see that that happens. CD9 is a new congressional district located entirely in Maricopa County. It includes Tempe and parts of Phoenix, Chandler, Mesa, Scottsdale, and Paradise Valley. 3 candidates are in the race to represent CD9. They are Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, a former state legislator, Republican Vernon Parker, a current councilman and former mayor of Paradise Valley, and Libertarian Powell Gamble, a retired microbiologist who's making his 5th run for Congress. Each candidate will have the opportunity for a 1-minute opening statement. We drew numbers to see who goes first, and that honor goes to Powell Gamble.
I differ from the other 2 candidates because I am not here to rule over you, but to advocate for our personal freedom. I live by a single principle, that it is wrong to initiate force or fraud on others. And I expect everyone else to live by that same standard. That is what the Founding Fathers were trying to give us. A system that maximizes personal liberty and profit and minimizes the cost to optimize our life by providing the freedom to keep and enjoy the fruits of our labors, and not to let a bunch of thugs in fine suits come along and steal from those labors by rule and confiscation. So tonight is really about the only 2 choices you have. You choosing who rules over you, or you choosing not to participate in that process. It is wrong to initiate force or fraud upon others.
Thank you very much. For the next opening statement, we now turn to Kyrsten Sinema.
Well, good evening. And Ted, thanks so much for having us here this evening. You know, I'm running for Congress because I believe that Congress is no longer serving we the people. You know, all across this great country, folks are struggling, especially right here in Arizona, to get jobs and keep jobs and take care of their families. But we've got a Congress that's more interested in political bickering and taking partisan ideology swipes at each other than solving real problems. I believe that we deserve better. Across the state, folks who don't have jobs are trying hard to get them and make it to the middle class. Folks who have jobs are struggling to keep them and take care of their kids and prepare for their kids' future. And we need folks who are willing to work across the aisle to help solve problems. I've got a record of doing just that. In the 7 years that I served in the Arizona State Legislature, I built a reputation of working across the aisle with folks on both edges of the political spectrum to solve problems. Folks like Mo Udall and Barry Goldwater provide a great, I think, opportunity for us to fill those roles and carry on that great tradition in Arizona.
Thank you very much. And our final opening statement is from Vernon Parker.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you all for tuning in. Our country is going through some very difficult times. We have out-of-control spending. We have unacceptable unemployment. When I served as mayor, I had to make some very difficult decisions to, one, either raise taxes or to cut our spending. I worked with Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and we cut our spending by 30%, and our town was better off for it. If you send me to Congress, I promise you that I will work across the aisle to work with Republicans and Democrats to make sure that we get America back to work, that we get the middle class back to work, and that we have a health care system that is second to none, an education system that is second to none, and that we restore the $716 billion that have been raided from Medicare. I promise to work and put the American people first and do not put Republicans or Democrats in front of the American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get to it here. Kyrsten, we'll start with you. How best do we create jobs in Arizona, in America?
Well, Ted, that's an important question. You know, I put out a 12-point job plan that actually talks about specific ways that Congress can help create a better job climate in Arizona and throughout the country. Now, we don't have time to talk about all those 12 points, but I'll mention a few. First, right now, companies actually get tax rewards for shipping jobs overseas, which leaves Americans out of jobs and shortchanged. I want to switch that tax code around so we provide tax incentives for businesses that hire folks right here in America. Number 2, I want to support businesses and give them tax credits and incentives to hire veterans, who have served our country and when they come home have great skills that we can put to use right here in Arizona. A third example, the Research and Development Tax Credit. You know, when I served in the state legislature, I helped shepherd through a research and development credit that brings high-tech, high-wage jobs to Arizona. We need to do that federally in the long term to bring those jobs right here to America.
Vernon, how best to get jobs in Arizona, in
Absolutely.
America?
I have a 16-point plan, so maybe mine is 4 points better than Ms. Simmons. I don't know. However, the first thing that we should do is that we should freeze the current tax rate. If we do that, Ted, we would put $4,000 in the pockets of middle-class Americans. The second thing, we must become more competitive on the global scene. We can no longer have the highest corporate income tax in the world. Right now, we're in the high 30s, and if we lower our corporate income tax to 22%, we will create 2 million jobs here in America. And also, if we reinvest and make sure that the research and development tax credits, if they're extended by 25%, another 500,000 jobs. And the next point is that I fully support building I-11 from Las Vegas to Phoenix because that will create jobs. And I would also advocate that we keep Luke Air Force Base open. That provides 17,500 jobs to this economy with $2.2 billion, which Ms. Sinema had proposed that we shut.
Actually,
respond to that, please.
Not accurate at all. And actually, this is something I find pretty offensive. You know, my grandpa is an Army veteran. He served in World War II and got a Purple Heart. My dad served in Vietnam. I've got a big brother who served in the Marines and a little brother who's currently serving in the United States Navy as a gunner's mate. So lots of guys in my family are military families, and I've got a strong record of supporting military families and veterans. And in fact, I'm the only candidate sitting here at the table this evening who's got a record on Luke Air Force Base. Ted, over the course of 7 years in the state legislature, I voted not once but 8 times to protect and preserve Luke Air Force Base. This is unfortunately just another piece of misinformation.
But did you ever advocate to close Luke Air Force Base?
Did you advocate to close Luke Air Force Base?
You know, in 2002, when I was first running for the legislature as an independent, I grew up in a Republican family, so it took me a while to become a Democrat.
Was it the Green Party or an independent?
Independent. When I was younger, I had thought, based on some information I had been told, that it'd be a good idea. But I'll tell you what, my brothers taught me that the most important thing we could do is to keep those jobs open. And that's why I've passed legislation to protect military families and veterans throughout this state.
Pal, I want to get you in on this, creating jobs in Arizona and in the country.
Seriously, this is how you reduce the debt that we're in, is keeping an Air Force base open. You know, come on. Now, jobs. How do you get jobs into the state? Jobs are created when businesses have surplus money and needs. They almost always have needs. How do they get surplus money? Well, with the federal government ripping them off left and right with high taxes, you've got to basically go in there and gut that. And my personal opinion is we eliminate all federal taxes and corporate taxes at the federal level and see how good the baking skills of one of these two are. Now, before you jump on that, the other thing I'd like to jump on is we need to get rid of all the regulations and mandates that the government puts on businesses that crushes the life out of them. And you do that, and you suddenly have surplus money in those businesses, they will start to hire people.
Vernon, the idea of supply-side economics, some would argue that why would we return to that particular ideology, philosophy, what have you, when some see that as one of the reasons we had the Great Recession in the first place? How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond by saying that we must be very competitive on the global sense. Once again, we cannot have the highest corporate income tax in the world. We must reduce our corporate income tax because our number one export right now, we are exporting jobs to China. We're exporting jobs to India. And I firmly believe that in order for us to be more competitive, that we must take a look at our current tax structure.
What do you think about the idea that cutting taxes is the best way to stimulate the economy, and that the idea that tax cuts will eventually pay for themselves?
Well, some tax cuts make a lot of sense. For instance, I support the Bush tax cuts continuing for middle-class families, because right now, Ted, those families are struggling just to put food on the table, get gas in the tank, and prepare their kids for the future. But Vernon and I have a fundamentally different idea of how to help middle-class families get back on their feet. He suggests the number one way to do that is to cut corporate taxes. I think the number one way to do it is to support middle-class families. For instance, I believe that we should stop the Bush tax cuts for the richest 2% in our country. You know, Ted, if we continue those tax cuts for the richest 2%, it'll add $1 trillion to our country's deficit over the next 10 years. And I don't think we can leave that for our kids and our grandkids. That's not the legacy we want to create for them.
What about that top-end tax rate?
Yeah, let me respond. Ms. Sinema, she has proposed in the past that we raise taxes on middle-class families who make $75,000 or more. She has also proposed that we tax services such as barbershops, hairdressers, and she's proposed that we tax plastic bags 25 cents per bag. That will put an enormous burden on middle-class families. Now, look, when people talk about, let's not cut taxes, look, when you cut taxes on people who are making $200,000 or $250,000, those are small business owners. Those are LLCs. Those are S Corps. And they are paying at the individual rate, Ted. They are hiring Americans. So the notion that someone who makes $200,000 or $250,000, that they are rich and wealthy and that they should not receive tax breaks, that's unimaginable.
Well, the one thing I'd like to respond to, Ted, is just to clarify my record. In the 7 years that I served in the Arizona State Legislature, I never once voted for a tax increase on middle-class families. So I think the record is very clear here. But again, Vernon has highlighted a very real difference between us. He wants to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans, and I think we need to give those breaks to middle-class families and folks who are struggling to make it to the middle class. You know, Ted, when I was a kid, my dad lost his job, and we ended up homeless for a few years. We worked hard to make it back to the middle class. But if it hadn't been for programs like the low-income tax credit that helped folks like me with Pell Grants get back on our feet, we wouldn't have made it.
Ted, just 30 seconds here. The reason why Ms. Sinema did not raise taxes is because the legislature was and is controlled by Republicans. So she never had the opportunity. But she has advocated tax increases. So that's a little unfair to say that she didn't vote for tax increases because she never had the opportunity to.
Ted, I do believe that the richest 2% in our country
government
should pay their fair share. And I think most Americans would agree with that.
Okay. Respond to that then, because we've heard that in the presidential debate. We've heard that in debates all around the country. The idea that $250,000 plus a year folks need to pay more of their share, should pay more of their share. Valid?
Those are individuals that you must understand this. Those are individual small business owners who have S Corps and LLCs. They pay at the individual rate. They hire people, Ted. So if they're going to be taxed at that rate, they won't have the resources to reinvest into our community. They won't have the resources to create more jobs. So it is unfair to tax those individuals who are supplying 90% of the jobs in this country.
Quickly.
Well, he's doubling down on trickle-down economics, which just doesn't work.
And she's
I'm worried about the
doubling up on
folks who are teachers, nurses, doctors, and he's worried about millionaires and billionaires. It's just a real difference between us.
I don't think anyone who makes $250,000, who hire many Americans across this country, can be considered to be a millionaire. That is totally incorrect.
Get in on this, please.
All right. One, I never got a job from a poor person, so don't take away their money and expect that rich people's money and expect jobs to go up, expect it to go the opposite way. Secondly, no corporation or business in this country pays any tax. All those taxes that you woo-hoo out there on, we're sticking it to the rich or we're sticking it to corporations, guess what? That gets passed on to the products that company manufactures. So effectively, you are basically taxing yourself when you sit there and cheer the businessman getting hammered.
All right, we move to health care. Would you have voted for the Affordable Care Act?
Ted, I would have voted for it. And as many folks in Arizona know, I worked hard to help shape that law to make it fit Arizonans' needs. Now, I'm the first to say that this law is not perfect. There's a lot of stinkers in that legislation. But there are some important parts of the law that must be protected. Protections for kids with pre-existing health conditions like autism or Down syndrome. Protection for folks who are diagnosed with diseases like breast cancer so that they don't get kicked off their insurance when they're diagnosed with a disease. What we need is not a repeal. First of all, it's not very practical. It's not likely to happen. But what we do need is bipartisan action to come together and fix some of the parts of the law that don't work well for America's small businesses and families.
How would you have voted for the Affordable Care Act?
I would not have look, here, this topic is very personal for me. My wife, she had third-stage breast cancer. Ted, we lost our insurance because we could not afford it. But she recovered. And she recovered. Why? Because we have the best doctors in the world. We have the best healthcare system in the world, but it's not affordable. Now, the Affordable Care Act did several things that I believe went too far. For example, it is too expensive. It will cost us $2.6 billion. But the one provision that I think is just reprehensible is that it robs Medicare of $716 billion. And when I get to Congress, I will fight to make sure that those cuts are restored. And third, this is a single pay. Third, we are going to have bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. destroying the doctor-patient relationship, telling us when we can see doctors, how we can see them. And fourth, Ted, I'm sorry, but fourth, look, it will destroy small business because never before in American history have we said that if you hire more than 50 people and they work more than 39 hours per week, that you will be penalized.
Too intrusive, too expensive, too damaging to small business.
Well, I think the small business fix does need to happen, but a wholesale repeal of the law is neither practical nor realistic. What we need to do is work together to create more affordability for mid-sized businesses, businesses between 50 and 200 employees. There is one thing I do want to point out, Ted, that I was concerned that Mr. Parker said, and it's a story that's been repeated over and over in the media and been debunked as a lie from the beginning. And that is the cuts, the massive cuts to Medicare. The truth is that the Affordable Care Act cuts out waste, fraud, and abuse. And I would think that we would all agree that we want to get rid of that in our system.
Ted,
the concerning thing is Mr. Parker's support for the Romney-Ryan budget. He recently said that he supports their approach to entitlements. Now, that budget would voucherize Medicare and cost seniors like my grandma $6,400 more each year. Now, my grandma can't afford that kind of an increase.
Ted, I am on record. I have never said that I supported the Romney-Ryan budget. I have never said that. Now, let's get back to this health care. Look, I agree with certain aspects. One, that we should be able to purchase insurance for our children up until the age of 26, and God knows we need it now because these kids do not have jobs. And two, we must address pre-existing conditions. Now, in order to drive down those costs, we must be able to purchase insurance across state lines. But this is a very important point, this point right here. Doctors, they practice defensive medicine. When my wife, who had third-stage breast cancer, we had to pay for all these tests. And so we told the doctor said that you need this test, and this test. And I said, Doc, I have to pay for this. He said, well, you don't need this one and this one. I said, why did you prescribe it? He said, because I'm afraid that I will be sued. And that is not medicine. That is
okay, I got Powell. Why don't you get in on this?
All right, health care. Is there any greater example for why the Constitution and the federal government are completely at odds with one another? The Constitution is supposed to limit the federal government. There's nothing in the Constitution about health care or a lot permitting Congress to pass health care laws, but they do all over the place in mandates. So, I would have voted against it. And I think this shows more of a difference between myself and the other two candidates than any other issue, because I completely oppose the federal government having any say in any aspect of people's medicine, especially the mandate provisions.
Social Security, should it be privatized? Contributions going to stocks, these sorts of things. Medicaid, should it be turned over to states? I mean, should there be just a radical relook at these programs?
Well, that's a great question, Ted. You know, and this is another area where Vernon and I differ. Earlier this year, he told a Tea Party audience that he was interested in the Romney-Ryan budget as it relates to entitlements.
That's not true.
And that, okay. So,
it's not true. We'll just keep saying that.
So there's three areas where I think that really matters, and that's Medicaid block payments. Block payments of Medicaid to Arizona would cause us to lose more than half of the funding that we get to pay for health care in Arizona. That hurts Arizona's kids. And it also means that those tax dollars are going to other states. Now, that makes no sense. If Arizonans are paying those taxes, we should get those dollars back. And in terms of Social Security and Medicare, these are very personal issues to me. My own grandmother was widowed when she was in her early 20s down in Tucson. She raised 3 kids on her own, working minimum wage at Furr's Cafeteria in South Tucson. And when she retired, all she had was Social Security and Medicare. So schemes that Republicans in Congress are proposing to privatize Social Security or voucherize Medicare, to end Medicare as we know it, those are dangerous programs, dangerous ideas. Dangerous
ideas for these programs.
Absolutely. I will tell you this. I have never advocated privatizing Social Security. And I am on record for continually saying that we must uphold our commitment to our seniors. We must preserve Medicare. We must preserve Social Security. Now, the system is broken, and so we're going to have to do something to fix the system. And when I get to Congress, I will sit down with Republicans, with Democrats, to make sure that in the future that we resolve the issues surrounding Social Security and Medicare.
What about returning Medicaid to the states?
I have no problem with that.
You have no problem with that?
Right.
So you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a good idea.
Returning Medicaid to the states?
You know, Ted, this is a real area of difference between us, because if Medicaid were returned to the state as a block grant, we would lose over 50% of the funds that we currently get. And this means that low-income workers, people with disabilities, and seniors, you know that seniors make up 65% of the folks who benefit from access in this state. So making those block cuts would mean that my grandma wouldn't get care, that kids with disabilities wouldn't get care.
But some would argue, though, that that states, and the governor has certainly made that argument here, we can't afford what's going on right now with access.
Well, the truth is, Ted, we can't afford to not do it, because when we don't ensure that folks have access to affordable health care, they show up for health care anyway in the emergency room. And you and I both know it costs 12 times as much to see a doctor at the emergency room than to see a doctor in his or her office. It doesn't benefit Arizona to cut this program.
Last word on that.
Yeah, the last word is that this is a clear difference, because Ms. Sinema will continually throughout the entire night believe that big government is the answer, that the federal government should be in control. I believe that decisions should be made at the state level. A lot of these decisions should be made at the state level because we are here. We don't need Washington, D.C. telling us how to do business in the state of Arizona.
Social Security, Medicare, returning Medicaid to the states. What do you think?
I'm appalled that you would toss your grandmother out in the street simply because she doesn't have health insurance, which is what I just heard you say. I would think you'd come up with money and help her out, but I guess instead you'd rather put a gun to every American in the country and fleece them of their hard-earned wages.
Do you believe that there are people who simply don't have the means to take care
Absolutely.
of these kinds of things?
And you know what used to happen up until the 1950s was that we had charities, etc., that would take care of such people, church groups, etc., and the federal government has basically come in and run them out of the business of doing that and taken over on its own.
All right.
At any rate, as you already could guess, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid,
right.
Zero, all the way across the board. It's a tax, nothing more.
Is man-made climate change real? Is it happening? Do you believe in that?
Well, I don't believe that Al Gore invented the internet either. Here's the thing. Man-made climate change, we must be good stewards of our environment. We must make sure that we protect our environment, Ted.
Is man-made climate change real?
You know, climate change is real, and there's a lot of evidence, overwhelming evidence, that man's impact has made a difference. That's why I support plans to help create solar energy and improve alternative energy here in Arizona. It's part of my jobs plan. Ted, it's not only important to help us address the issue of climate change, it's also important from a national security perspective. The faster we can become more dependent on renewable sources right here in Arizona, like solar energy, the less likely we're going to continue being dependent on volatile markets in the Middle East.
How hard do you push for renewables here in Arizona?
Very hard, but here's the problem that we have right now. We have the largest oil reserve in the world, and if we tapped into that reserve, believe me, our economy would take off. And so we have to make sure that we, as someone said, that our president does not bow down to a Saudi king. We have the reserves. We must utilize those reserves. I'm in favor of nuclear. I'm in favor of clean coal. I'm in favor of solar. So whatever it is that gets us away and gets us full independence, we need to pursue it.
Quickly, the idea, drill more, find more resources within America.
I do believe that it's important for us to keep all of our options on the table, but the truth is we can make a lot more clean energy using solar technology at an even cheaper rate than in the past without endangering some of our greatest wildlife resources and some of our greatest natural resources.
So you would not drill, right?
We have to stop it right there.
Shucks, we were just having fun.
We were just getting going here. Each candidate will now give a 1-minute closing statement, and going in reverse order of the opening statements, we start with Vernon Parker.
The first shall be last and the last shall be first. Thank you, Ted, and thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun. I am asking you today to support me, send me to Congress. We must get our economy going. We must put the middle class back to work, and we must protect our seniors, protect Medicare, protect Social Security, and we must have an education system that is second to none. And you have my commitment that I will work with Republicans and Democrats, because right now we have a Congress that gets nothing done because they are more concerned about pinning the tail on the donkey or trying to lasso the elephant. And I can tell you right now, the American people, they have been lost. I will work hard to make sure that we keep the prosperity of this country and that we work to ensure for future generations that they have a future. Please send me to Congress. I will work for you.
Thank you very much. Our next closing statement is from Kirsten Sinema.
Thanks, Ted. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning of our debate this evening, I'm running for Congress because I think we deserve better. You know, I'm a native Arizonan, and as I mentioned earlier, my family faced tough times when I was a kid. When my dad lost his job, we lost everything. But yet, as I was homeless as a kid for 2 years, thanks to this great country and the opportunities afforded us and a good public education system, I was able to get back on my feet and make it to the middle class. I want that same opportunity for every kid and every family in this country. I'm running for Congress because I believe that we can keep those doors of opportunity open. When we combine hard work and assistance to help each other make it through, we can create a country that we are all proud of every single day. You know, back in the days, Arizona was known for its pragmatic, common sense solutions, and we can be known for that again. I'm the only candidate who's got a history of working across the aisle to solve problems, and I promise to do that same thing for you if you send me to Washington, D.C. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And our final closing statement is from Pal Gamble.
Another 2 years and yet another opportunity to either vote for a whole bunch of offices where one candidate is obviously going to win and therefore your vote doesn't count, or where an R and a D are both unacceptable, where once again you get to choose between the lesser of two evils. Well, choosing evil is still evil. The only alternative is to choose not to participate in what is a voluntary process. Don't vote. You have better things to do than reaffirm the process where a bunch of thugs get anointed to divvy up your stolen labor in a 60-40 split. The Washington Party does not need your choice because either candidate is acceptable to them. What they need is your participation and your consent in the anointing. Deny them both by finding better things to do this election.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us tonight on this special edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. That is it for now. You have a great evening.